Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the first week of Sagalong. This is a April read-along of one Icelandic saga, Njal Saga, which has an anonymous author, so it's not related by anyone in particular. And in previous years of Sagalong, this is the third annual Sagalong. In previous years, we've read multiple sagas within the month, but this year we're just doing this one big saga. And I'm reading it in this Penguin Classic edition with a translation and edited by Robert Cook. And this is the longest, I don't know if it's the longest of all the sagas, but it's the longest of the so-called family sagas, which are these series of about 40 sagas that are all sort of vaguely interconnected in terms of like the characters who recur throughout them and familial relationships between different characters in them. And some of the characters in this saga we've seen appear in past sagas, like in the Laxardal saga. And so this is sort of often considered to be one of the sort of crowning achievements of the saga literature. And something interesting that I learned from Robert Cook's introduction that I just want to touch on at the beginning here is that the saga was probably written around 1280 AD, and that time in Icelandic history was very tumultuous. There was a civil war going on in Iceland that would eventually lead to the dissolution of the Icelandic Commonwealth, as it was called, and the taking over of Iceland by Norway, which would remain the status quo until, I believe, the 20th century. And so it was written in this very dark time in Icelandic history, as were all of the sagas, actually. There was sort of a distinct period of like a century or so where the sagas were mostly written. And what I also think is interesting is that the sagas all take place in a similar time period. They take place around 930 to 1030. And that was not too long after the first settlement of Iceland. And so they were... The sagas were written at a point where many Icelanders may have felt like their country was in decline, about a time where their country was sort of in its nascent stages, when it was first being settled and created and established and so on. But it was also kind of, it feels like it was these writers in this dark time, looking back sort of nostalgically on a past, when people were more noble and honorable and exalted, even if they weren't happy, because I don't think anyone was looking back on the saga age and thinking, oh yeah, everyone back then was living these wonderful lives and everyone was wonderful to each other, because obviously this saga, as many sagas, is incredibly violent, incredibly dark, and very pessimistic in tone and very pessimistic thematically. And so anyway, that was just something I wanted to touch on with the sagas, but to move into the story in particular, so we've read the first 40 chapters of Saga for this week, and I am loving it. I am absolutely loving it. It's full of many short stories, kind of. A lot of these stories you could see someone telling, like around a campfire, as just a really brief story to entertain your friends, a little bit like reading Chaucer or the Decameron or the Metamorphoses, how they all have these little stories that you could sort of tell in one sitting. And I love books like that, and this is sort of the epitome of that, because a lot of these stories last for a page or a paragraph or 2 pages or something like this. And there are a lot of characters, and that can be a little bit disorienting, because you're getting introduced to character after character after character, but within a paragraph or 2 or a page, you realize that character's importance, and it's very soon you start to get invested in them. And so I'm really, really enjoying this, and something that I am really noticing about these first 40 chapters is just how much the female characters drive the action, and that's something I notice in a lot of the sagas, that they're often driven by the female characters and dominated in a way by the female characters, and that's just interesting, because I think when we often, in the 21st century at least, when we think about literature from this far back in time, we tend to think that it's always going to be male-dominated, and then you go and you read it and you realize that that's not really the case. And certainly this saga and other sagas are a great example of that, because basically the very first story in this saga does ostensibly center around a man named Hrut, who marries, or at least gets engaged to this woman named Un. But then he decides that he needs to leave Iceland for a little while to take his inheritance from back in Norway. And so the marriage is put off, but he's still like betrothed to Un. And while he's away, he basically starts an affair with the Dowager Queen of Norway, or at least I think she's like the Dowager Queen or something like this of Norway. So she and her name is Gunhild, and she wields a lot of power in Norway as the mother of the king, and she initiates this affair with Hrut. So the very first story involves a very powerful woman exerting a lot of influence, because Gunhild also helps Hrut to sort of get in with the king of Norway, to get into his bodyguard and get his favor. But she also initiates this affair with him. She also, in a way, kind of initiates the whole action of the saga, because she, when Hrut leaves her to go marry, she tells him, she sort of doesn't actually curse him, but like puts this charm on him, saying that he will not be happy in the marriage he's going to have with Un, because he won't be able to please her sexually. And indeed, he goes and he marries Un, and notably, they don't have any children, and she also complains that he doesn't please her sexually, and so she divorces him after a while. And so the very first story is very much driven by like the desires of women, but even by the end of these 40 chapters, we see two characters in particular really dominating the story, and that is Hallgerd and Bergthora, and they are the wives of these very prominent, powerful men. So Njal, the title character of the saga, is the husband of Bergthora, and Gunnar, a very mighty sort of warrior, is the husband of Hallgerd. And Bergthora and Hallgerd have this sort of ongoing feud with one another. They keep sending a servant of their own out to kill the other's servant. And so one of them will have her servant go kill the other one's servant, and then that other one will have her servant go kill that one, and then so on and so forth, and this keeps happening. And Njal and Gunnar kind of always have to work this out, because you can't just let someone kill your servants without any kind of compensation or retaliation. And so far in the saga, we've seen Gunnar and Njal able to work it out through just compensation, or reparation, maybe is the word. Gunnar will pay Njal when his wife has one of his servants killed, and Njal will pay Gunnar when the likewise happens, and so on. But we can sort of see very gradually it start to escalate as Njal and Gunnar start to have to pay each other more. And so I'm guessing that will flame up soon. But, that's sort of a very small instance of one of the major themes of the saga, which everyone always talks about, which is this idea of the cycle of revenge and blood feud, which is sort of an age-old story. It's an age-old idea in human history, because humans are so vengeful. We always need revenge for things, and it's really hard to end a cycle of revenge and blood feud, because once you kill, person X kills someone from person Y's family, someone from then in retaliation, someone from person Y's family needs to kill someone from person X's family, and then because of that killing, someone from person X's family needs to kill someone else from person Y's family, and it's really hard to end that. And so in this, and in the feud between Bergthora and Hallgerd, we see this in sort of a microcosm, right? Because like nothing monumental is happening between them. They're not causing wars. There's not massacres or something like this. It's a very small scale thing. It's still not a good thing, but it's very small scale at least. But we will see, I'm sure, we will see that flare up into something much worse later in the saga. And what I also want to say is that in the form of Njal and Gunnar's sort of negotiations with each other, we see an alternative to that. We see the idea that, you can solve things through laws and, civility and reparation, rather than through retaliation and punishment. And so we have kind of three different models of how to respond to a wrong that has been done to you. We have revenge, which we've seen a lot of. We have compensation. It's not eye for an eye, but it's, you pluck my eye out, and so then you pay me some money in compensation for that. Or it's sort of forgiveness. It's, okay, you've wronged me, but I forgive you, a very humble approach. And, Robert Cook touches on these ideas in his introduction, and he talks about how the sort of forgiveness idea, the sort of turn the other cheek idea, and the revenge idea are often sort of dichotomized as Christian and pagan. So you have the turn the other cheek from the Sermon on the Mount is a Christian thing. You have the revenge, blood feud as a pagan thing. And he emphasizes that that dichotomy is not really tenable, that is blurred a lot, especially in this saga. And I think we see that, you know, because none of the characters in this so far have converted to Christianity, and yet we have seen some instances of a character being wronged, but then deciding not to take retaliation. And again, these are kind of little glimpses of what could be, you know what I mean? Glimpses of what the world could be if humans weren't so obsessed with blood feud and revenge. Yeah, and that's kind of sad when you think about it. So, just to touch on a few other aspects of this that I do find interesting. There's this idea in drama, especially in plays, of the unseen, of a scene that happens off stage but is narrated by a character on the stage. And in this saga so far, we've seen a couple of instances of that, but in sort of the reverse, where a character isn't narrating something that already happened. They're narrating what will happen or what needs to happen. And then the narrator is just sort of like, oh yeah, and then what he said happened just as he said it would. And then it goes forward from there. So there are these sort of inversion of this idea of the unseen. The fighting and deaths are described in a lot of detail in the saga so far. So yeah, like anatomically accurate. It's actually, the fight scenes are quite interesting. I usually don't love reading fight scenes, but they're really evocatively described in this saga, and I'm like morbidly fascinated by them. So I'm actually quite liking that. And then last observation is that, you know, in this saga we see a lot of preoccupation with weddings and marriages. So like Halgerd, the current wife of Gunnar, has been married twice already, right? And her two previous husbands had been killed. And I don't know if that's foreshadowing, I don't know, no spoilers, but I mean, I don't know, I haven't read, so. But yeah, so we have this preoccupation with marriage, and obviously the first story, as I've already talked about, was Hrut getting married, and before getting married, having an affair with someone who wasn't his betrothed. There's a lot of mention of marriages and weddings, and also the all thing, as it's called, or just the thing, which is sort of a gather, or I'm not quite sure what it is, but it seems to be some sort of annual congress of prominent people in the Icelandic community who get together and just talk about various legal matters. You know, there is certainly a preoccupation with law in this saga. You know, the very first paragraph talks about a character who knew everything there is to know about the law, you know, and that was the father of Un, who would marry Hrut unhappily. And anyway, so we have this preoccupation with weddings and marriages, this preoccupation with the all thing, and they seem like these really great ways to push the story forward, right? Because you have all the characters gathering in this one spot, either for a wedding or for the all thing, and they all meet there, right? And so you have a lot of characters in one place at one time. And so it's a great place to push the drama forward, because one character can insult another character, and then a third character says, oh, calm down, guys, but then the fourth character is just like, no, kill him, or something. And they're great, and it does seem like these sagas operate on a sort of cycle, you know, like we have some action moving forward glacially, and then suddenly an all thing happens, and then things sort of blow up for a second, and then things start moving glacially again after the all thing, and then there's a wedding, and then things blow up again, and yeah, and so I'm noticing that too. So anyway, I am loving this, so yeah, I can't wait to talk about it with everyone and hear what everyone thinks. So I will leave links to all of my co-hosts in the description. There's a lot of them, so I can't list them all. But go check out their videos as well, and give me your thoughts if you're reading along, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.